In this broadcast, we are going to explore the concept of a sustainable career. We will hear from 3 experts who have built a career with sustainability at its core. 3 different approaches to this are explored here. The first is in a social enterprise, So the City, that creates community green space in Manchester. The second is Wayman Design, a design studio that uses creative practice to support sustainable use of materials and health and well-being of the community. The third is Q-Sustain, a sustainability consultancy that strives to design and create more sustainable infrastructure. All 3 of these approach sustainability quite differently and involve different expertise across a wide range of areas, industries, and sectors. However, all these individuals are passionate and motivated to build a successful career in sustainability and bring about positive change in their local, regional, and wider community. Finally, we will return to Amma from the Manchester Fuel Innovation Centre to hear about the sustainability skills gap and why gaining expertise in sustainability will make you an extremely desirable graduate to any company or industry. While watching this broadcast, think about what inspiration you can take from these individuals. Do any of these paths in particular stand out to you? How could you apply these ideas to your own future career? And also, think about what motivates you personally to be sustainable, and how could you turn that passion into a career?
I'm Kieran from So the City. I'm a director at So the City. Our mission is helping communities to grow and live sustainably. So we help improve the environment, green up Manchester and surrounding areas through the medium of food growing, creating community gardens, improving parks, all those kind of things. So you could say it's sort of like about, in terms of climate emergency, COP15 and biodiversity emergency, stuff like that. It contributes to environmental sustainability. Related to it though, it's the triple bottom line, I would say. So it's very much about economic sustainability, because if you can grow food, it helps things like food poverty, people can save money, people could sell that food maybe, in terms of a business, that sort of thing. People volunteer with us, so it's really good employability, particularly maybe people in recovery or people out of work. It's really good structure for the day. The thing for me, which is quite interesting, is the concept around social sustainability or community sustainability, and that's all about harnessing the strengths of a community, making people healthier. If places are greener, if people can afford to eat good healthy food, they will be healthier. So there's a social sustainability side to it as well. We also have a venue in Moss Side, which is called the Boiler House. This is a different form of sustainability, so it's not purely gardening led, but it's more about the social sustainability we talked about. And one of the things we do, which you may have heard of and even seen on the TV, is around repair. So we run repair cafes, because there's a huge amount of carbon, believe it or not, when wasted when a toaster's thrown away, or a Hoover, or a mobile phone. So if you can repair stuff, of which there's a huge economic opportunity in the future, I think they said it's about 400,000 jobs in this country alone in the repair sector. This is the Green Spaces Fund. So this is actually Andy Burnham's, the Mayor of Greater Manchester's latest initiative, and it's in part what he was elected upon in his latest manifesto. So like you'll have heard of the cheap bus fares and tackling homelessness, creating quality green spaces in areas that don't have them is another manifesto pledge. So I help him with that by, exactly the sort of things we were talking about before, getting to know your communities. I go out and try and stimulate projects because people want to see their environment changed. There's a lot of broken window syndrome out there. If it's a bit run down, let's just throw some litter, and people have given up on it. If you can inject some cash and energy to it, improve that environment, improve people's health, even just mental health, walking through a nice place, it can be really, really important. I graduated 22 years ago, which seems a long time ago now, just down the road. And at that time, it was very much like a conveyor belt in career paths. It was sort of like, do your degree, get a job. I'd studied in planning, and it was almost very much pointed towards the public or private sectors. That was what sort of seen. I spent almost a decade in the private sector, and there's some great bits to it, but there's also some not so great bits to it. And then when the 2008 crash happened, I was made redundant, and through the process of searching for new options at around the age of 30, I discovered the social enterprise sector, which is often known as the third sector. Actually, social enterprise is business for good causes. It's good business for people and planet. So I was really passionate to do something about climate in the world, and saw that perhaps a way to do this was to get kids involved with nature, because kids love carrots, kids love strawberries, kids love being outside. So I really wanted to start reaching children, getting them involved in thinking about the wider world. Social enterprises can play a really valuable role because they're driven by operating for people and planets. That's their mission. We're embedded in the community. We're what's called a VCSE organisation, which is voluntary community social enterprise. So, it's very much, we're not in a big skyscraper in town with global multinationals. We're in the estates and out and about with community groups and community networks. So, in terms of empowering people to meet some of those goals, we are right switched on for that. So sustainability, as we talked about before, a lot of people do just think of windmills or turning off a light or recycling a Coke can, don't they, when you talk about being sustainable. I actually think it's pretty much meaning of life stuff, because as we can see what's going on in the world, if we don't sustain ourselves, it's going to start burning up and we won't exist, and disaster and extinction and all that sort of stuff. So getting that balance right is possibly one of the meanings of life, one of the challenges of life.
I'm Jamie Lee. I'm a practitioner based in Greater Manchester. I have a studio here at Islington Mill. A lot of my work focuses on personal experiences through being neurodivergent, and I try and focus on using play and creativity as a tool for learning. Whether that be through my passion of 3D printing, which I love, or whether it's through making engaging spaces that people either learn about themselves, other people, or maybe about a specific topic. So I graduated from MMU about 18 months ago, I think. Graduated from 2021. And then since then, I've been actually going back and working with MMU students, teaching them to make bee houses, learning about sustainability, about recycled bioplastics. And it's just been really nice for them to see someone who has graduated and be able to have honest conversations about the difficulties of being a student, but also how to approach it to come out into the real world of employment. I had a year out from university, but it wasn't by choice. It was through Uni X where I'd been introduced to, I can't remember what the course was called. It was with Elle, and it was Beyond Educator. So at the end of my second year, I did the Beyond Educator Uni X, and that was the first time I'd been introduced to using art as a learning tool, and I absolutely loved it. I was so into the project. We didn't even make anything. It was all documentation and reflection. And then during the end of that unit, I fell really ill and found myself in hospital, realising I have endometriosis and my mobility was really poor. And through talking with the university, they're really accommodating. I got to change my unit to reflect how I was taking care of my well-being through art with my endometriosis at the time. And it's not what I expected from my course. However, it was a really nice experience that I didn't realise I needed. And I think without the project, or without the grade from that, I wouldn't have let myself explore those possibilities. And I think that really inspired a big part of my practice about well-being and being able to do it accessibly or wherever you are. Doing it in the hospital, it was just really helpful. Pens and paper, and it was just thinking about different questions, different processes that could really help me with that. I think using creativity to create a positive impact, it allows almost a type of communication that people who might find talking or writing difficult. So with my dyslexia and ADHD, what I recognised was writing or talking about my feelings just doesn't work for me sometimes, and I'm facing barriers about communication with not only work but within my own personal life. And I think art and creativity give you a way of being able to communicate with people through pictures, through colours, and I think that's something that I've really focused on when working with vulnerable young people, because they may have experienced trauma and might not be able to talk about those specific things. So it really makes it accessible to a lot more people, neurotypical, neurodivergent, all of young people. I think it just really facilitates a broad tool. I think when you're passionate about helping people, especially within the creative sector or well-being, it's almost like good people gravitate towards good people. And I've realised I've been introduced to amazing organisations, amazing facilitators, designers, practitioners that all have similar interests. And I think it is like everyone gravitates to you, or you're so interested in how they've done theirs. And because you want to make positive change, everyone's very open to talk about what they do. I want people to take inspiration from the different projects that I've done. So it's a really nice, almost bubble to be a part of. And also, I wished I was a bit more confident enough to go to an organisation maybe a year ago and be like, look, this is what I'm really passionate about. I've had my experiences and I would really like to either volunteer with you or work with you, because I'd just really like to build that relationship with your organisation. I just really wished I'd done that sooner than until I got the confidence, and almost it was refining the ideas, but also the ideas were already there. So I just wished I'd done that sooner, and people are just so open to talk to you about your work. I think sustainability is a really interesting word as well. Like I mentioned earlier about good people finding good people, I think if you are passionate about sustainability in your life, whether it's if you're passionate about recycling and what materials you're using, your bills, when you're mindful of this and conscious, you end up gravitating towards those people that consider sustainability. And by sustainability, it doesn't mean just the plastics that I work with. We're considering it as a broader range, and that's where we end up connecting through well-being. We're connecting through accessibility for different access needs and disabilities. We're connecting through the materials we use, and we're conscious of the impact on the planet. And I think I didn't recognise how that becomes a big bubble, and that I tend to find that the people that I work with, the first thing we talk about is make sure we're using recycled materials, or we know that it's going to biodegrade, or it is sustainable to the group, but also how are we benefiting the group that are attending? Is this going to really impact their day? Is it going to create a positive change on their experiences while not having an impact on the environment? And that is really core values within my practice. And I'm also in a position where I feel confident enough to say to someone, no, this isn't sustainable and I don't think I want to participate in this, because I do feel that strongly about it, and that might not just be a practitioner for me to work with. And I think recognising that has been a big step, because that's almost saying no to work sometimes. But if it's not something that reflects me and my morals, because it isn't just my practice, it's my own morals as a person, I really need to consider that when approaching a project.
So my name is Azakayu, so I'm the Managing Director and Founder of Q-Sustain Limited, which is a small SME growing sustainability consultancy. To me, sustainability really is all about a considerate lifestyle. Everything you do in the way we live, in the way we consume energy, consume produce and food, etc., is all about doing it in a considerate way, and doing it in a more sustainable way where we're not over consuming. So sustainability consultancy in the work we do is predominantly around carbon reduction, energy efficiency within buildings and infrastructure, mainly within a lot of the railway work and decarbonisation of the railway. Like many public sector areas, the railway has a target to achieve net zero by 2050 in accordance with the Climate Change Act of 2050, which is a legally binding target to achieve net zero. But a lot of our work is around the energy and carbon side, but we also do assist in work of waste reduction, increased recycling, and we also look at water efficiency as well, increasing biodiversity and ecology within a lot of the built environment, and looking at innovative ways of doing that with this green walls, green roofs, etc. And then alongside that, we also do a lot of work in air quality, in improving air quality, predominantly within railway stations, more in closed stations, where there's still a high proportion of diesel exhaust emissions. But predominantly a lot of our work is within the built environment and infrastructure, because a lot of carbon emissions are unfortunately generated by buildings. UK-wide, about 25% of our CO2 emissions are from buildings. Globally, it's about 40%. The increased cost of energy, that's created a surge in demand for our services, because the economic side and the numbers, previously we would have like a 10-year payback or 15-year payback on solar schemes. They've now halved, we've seen paybacks of like 5 years or less. So energy costs are soaring. There's a big realisation of how inefficient buildings are. People feeling drafts and saying, how can we reduce this? So that's one of the reasons. The other reason is people's targets in ESG strategies. So we've seen a lot of work around corporate environmental social governance, CSRs, etc., ESGs. We see all these buzzwords now around social governance and environmental governance, and having these corporate policies on energy and carbon targets. So we've seen an increase in our work due to them reasons, as well as on a corporate level. And I think also public opinion is changing, which is great, because it needs to happen if you're serious about climate action. And alongside of public opinion, people are looking to invest in more green corporate companies and green technologies, etc., rather than more fossil fuel, traditional based companies. So it's multifaceted at the moment in the reasons why we're quite busy. We find it's quite universal. Our specialism is within rail, and we find that with the railway industry, they're one of the biggest landowners, one of the biggest building stock owners in the country. People don't realise. One of the biggest energy consumers, actually the biggest energy, because of all the running of the trains, stations, etc., depots. So for us, that's one of the biggest areas that we're finding a big demand in trying to reduce the energy, reduce the carbon. But generally, we're finding within social housing sector, and general buildings infrastructure, we're finding big demand for this. So I think when I started my career, over 20 years ago, sustainability wasn't really at the forefront in a lot of the work that we were involved with. I was quite fortunate to work on some big projects, but for me, really, I always felt uncomfortable with the way society was going in general in terms of our human activity and its contribution towards climate change and global warming. And I just felt that I wanted to do something that had a purpose as well as making a living, and that was really important. I think from a family background as well, my father grew up in Kenya, so when he arrived in this country, he'd already instilled in us to look at everything in terms of not wasting anything. We never had much anyway in the early days of growing up, but it was really much there's very big family ethos, especially stemming from my father's background, around working with nature, looking after nature, being efficient, not wasting anything, turning off lights when you don't need them, and not wasting food and water, etc. So there's a big family input there as well. The big redevelopment of a train station in Birmingham, Birmingham's main station, New Street. And in the early days of me just being a project engineer on that project, I was asked towards looking at energy solutions, looking at the whole engineering side for the building services. And for that particular project, it was an early realisation that we needed to double the amount of power requirements to the station. It was a station that was going to be 4 times bigger than it used to be. 27 new escalators, 31 new lifts, that all created a bigger energy profile. And for me as an engineer, and engineers are supposed to be solving problems for today's world and looking at climate action, I felt uncomfortable working on a project that was doubling the amount of energy requirement by just going to the supplier for power is in, I need 2 big transformers and let's design that and get more power off the grid. Whereas we didn't really look at anything in terms of renewables at that time. Very early on, and this is going back 2009 and 8. But then when I was looking at this project, I really pushed the client team to say, we have to think differently. And they said, well, what do you mean? I said, we need to look at renewable technology. We cannot have a project doubling the amount of energy without any kind of renewable technology or energy to contribute towards that. So we needed some more sustainable development. Then from then on, I was kind of given a blank sheet of paper to just really write down and get down key requirements. They were then embedded into the project. We then followed something called the BREEAM certification, which is Building Research Establishment Environmental Assessment Method. Methodology says how green your project is. That was all the work we did in terms of trying to lock in a methodology to create a green development and benchmark that against others so we can get certification accreditation. And by the end of that project, we were the first to do a heat network on the station, first to get a BREEAM rating, first for green walls, first for recycling rainwater at a main station. So all these initiatives kickstart from the work we did, really by having a change of culture. Well, it wasn't easy at the time though, because I remember some quite difficult meetings with people like, you're adding more complexity to an already complicated project, because sustainability at that time wasn't really at the forefront. But I was quite lucky then in the years that came, then strategies were changing, legislation was changing, everything was going towards more green development. So I was quite lucky to push the boundaries in the early days and challenge the status quo. Take some stick for it in return, but really challenge and push the boundaries in green tech.
My name's Azakayu. I'm the director of the Manchester Fuel Cell Innovation Centre here at Manchester Metropolitan University. I think sustainability skills are a key part of the future economy, especially as we move towards this greener economy, because if you take the viewpoint that every single job now has to be a green job, it means that there's multiple functions of any business all have to understand sustainability, they have to understand net zero and what implications that has on a business. So if I take the example of what type of skills will be required to deliver on these, it's skills across multiple sectors. So we need more digital skills to understand sustainability, we need more STEM subjects, we need more people to understand the psychology impact of all of this infrastructure and all of the implications of net zero. There are multiple skills requirements, and the only way you make this work is bringing together the whole supply chain. So that's why I think understanding what role universities will play, what role FE colleges will play, what role will industry play, bringing them all together to contribute to the development of these skills is going to be key.